Thank you. I'm going to start this morning by showing you a little video that's been going around the internet. I think it'll make my first point. Okay, well, I wanted to kind of set the stage for talking about what's the background in which our careers are being shaped in 2007 all the way to 2020. And I know this is a kind of a heavy topic for early in the morning like this, but I think that the first thing we ought to do is be very cognizant that when we talk about the best thing you can do for your career is be a lifetime learner. It's taking on unbelievable proportions against this shifting global economy that we find ourselves in. So when we say lifetime learners, and any of you who've been on the internet, you see that you can go on Google and you can learn. Whoop.
If you come back and stand behind the table.
I'm sorry,
Then the light will be better.
Sorry. So if you've been on the web, you kind of know that there's just so much to learn everywhere. And so I think as we think about our careers, we ought to think about, well, what are the key things that we need to develop for, what are the skills, what are the talents we want to kind of develop going forward. And Harry and I were talking here before the program about there's not enough time, and I pulled some statistics off that are kind of interesting. According to Business Week in 2005, 31% of college-educated male workers are regularly logging 50-plus hours a week, and that's up from 22% in 1980. Additionally, in that same study, they showed that those employees that log 40 hours a week have had no real pay in real terms, no real pay increase for 15 years, while those people who are logging 50-plus hours a week, or 55-plus hours a week, I think the study showed, have been up 14%. So, the first thing you might say is, Bill, does that just mean we're all going to have to work 15, 16, 70 hours a week to advance? And I think that there is, I think when I first started my career, there was all this talk about leisure time, that we're going into a period of, we're going to go into a period where we're going to have a 35-hour work week. And all of a sudden, global technology, global competition has changed to where I would guess that most of you are struggling holding your work hours down rather than more, because now all of a sudden at home, you've got email, you've got a BlackBerry, you can be talked to at any time, day or night. And so the struggle, when you talk about being a lifetime learner, I think the issue is how to focus your resources. And I think there are really two pretty untapped areas that I want to talk about this morning. And I think the first one is performance appraisals. Now, you've all had performance appraisals. Many of you have written performance appraisals. So let me state a little background. In this very competitive world, I believe that performance appraisals are the most underused resource we have in terms of focusing our attention on our what we do well and what we don't do so well. And I believe also that when you think about a performance appraisal, you should be thinking about it in a different way. You should be thinking that I have given a year of my life to this organization, whatever it is. And for that year of my life, they've paid me, but in addition, they owe me a very serious and a very respectful evaluation of my skills, strengths, and weaknesses. And I'm going to make a suggestion here. It'll sound a little radical, but I think that if you think about your performance appraisals, and if you find yourself in an organization where they don't do a good job with performance appraisals, you ought to say, listen, I would like a very candid, respectful performance appraisal so that I can be a better employee in this company. And then I find that those people, I've written thousands of performance appraisals. And when someone who's worked for me comes back 3 months later and said, here's what you've written, here's my improvement plan. What do you think? I'm awestruck because I realize that some people take those performance appraisals and shove them in their desk and say, "Whew, got through that year, got my raise, I'll wait for next year." While others take it very carefully and say, I'm going to go from this performance appraisal to a development plan. They look at it once a quarter. They have a plan for moving themselves forward. And I believe that that's one of the key areas that you can tap for your lifetime or online or ongoing learning. Is you say to your supervisor, what are the areas that my job requires? And I think a performance appraisal is one of the areas where if you pull it out quarterly, if you set a set of plans for it, it will turn out to be your best friend in terms of your ability to develop your career. The other area that I think is untapped is the whole area of mentoring. And you know, I think we're all subject to self-delusion. I had a friend that used to call it drinking our own bathwater. But none of us are immune to having blind spots. And the one thing that you can do in terms of your career and your career development is to have a mentor who will talk candidly to you, who will give you ideas and suggestions. And mentoring doesn't have to be, you know, about everything in life. You can say, okay, I want to be mentored in some narrow technical subject. Design for test. Harry and I were talking about that. It just on my mind. So you can say, I want to learn about design for test. Harry, would you meet with me for 4 or 5 sessions and teach me what you know about design for test? Or it can be someone that you choose in your life and say, I'm a brand new CEO. Would you mentor me in what it's like to be a CEO? Or it could be someone that in general life balance, family, spirituality, all those. It could be very, very broad. But why is it so needed? Well, it's needed because many of us in this culture are not living in a family environment close to our extended family where we have people who will be candid, who will be very straight with us, take a risk of telling us what we really need to know. And secondly, in your career, in a background of this dramatic shift globally, you have less and less margin for error. I mean, if you spend 10 or 12 years on a detour in your career, it's very hard to make that up and come back and have a very powerful career in another area. So I think that the margin for error is less, and the cultural environment says many of us are away from our families and people that we would normally have these strong relationships, and so a mentor in your life, in my view, is a very untapped resource. So the 3 things I want to make sure we're clear about. It's obvious, it's got to be obvious to anybody in a rapidly changing environment that you've got to be a lifetime learner. And then, how do you focus that lifetime learning? I think the 2 untapped resources that I've seen over the last 30, 40 years in business is performance appraisals and mentoring. So I hope that makes sense to you. And then I'd like to shift just quickly to another area. When you think about your development, a lot of people think about skills and professional development alone. And I think it was Stephen Covey, probably in the late 80s. He wrote a book, The the 7 Habits of Effective People. And he began a process by bringing into your business skills. I mean, he used words like soul and conscience, because he was writing that he did a study very early on that said in corporate America, I think they interviewed 23,000 fairly high-level successful people, and they found that 50% of them weren't happy with what they were doing. And you know, these are the people that were quote making it. And what he found was that there had to be a balance between your passions, your kind of your inner wiring, and your career. And when that met, when you had a set of talents and skills matched with your passions, focused on a need, and then I think he added a term, he said, driven by your conscience, then you're a very powerful person. And so that led me to start thinking about that in addition to career development, there's this whole issue of character development. How do you develop your character? And I was shocked. I went on the web. I wanted to make this point, and I went on the web for a study, and I just happened to land on a study that was done at Gordon College down near Atlanta. And they did a study in April of 2002 about college students cheating. Now, you say, whoa, we all know college students cheat. But the surprise to me was, this was a fairly detailed study, and it said that 92% of this large survey said that cheating was wrong, but only 44% said that it was socially acceptable. And then they went in by category, by major, if you will, and asked students if they had cheated, if they had been asked to cheat, would they assist people in cheating, and was it socially acceptable. The surprise was that one of the majors, I'll tell you here in a minute, where cheating was widespread, was 60% of the students admitted they'd been cheating. And this was the business major. They were the top category. And the bottom category was math and science. The old techies were, I guess they hadn't awakened to the new realities yet. In the light of what happened at Enron and what happened at WorldCom, and I'll remind you again, Enron was the dissolution of the 7th largest public company in the United States. And the estimates are varied, but trillions of dollars of people's money was lost. Now, the surprising thing is, I'm down at a Harvard Business School class last week in San Diego, and we're at a table and we're discussing some of this cheating, and one of these guys, high-profile guy in industry, says, yeah, I can understand why students cheat. The consequences, you know, if you're trying to get into med school or you're trying to get into an MBA program and your grades are low, you're not going to get into the program. And so literally his idea was that if the stakes are high, it justifies cheating. So that led me to start thinking a little more about where do we get, here we're in a very aggressive, I'll say, fight for our lives, to exaggerate a little bit, in our careers. We're trying to balance that with family and exercise and all that, and the stakes are high. So where do we get our moral compass to guide us in terms of are character development. And you know, character is not something that you're just kind of born with. You have a set of life experiences, life teachers that teach you about integrity, about care for, concern for others, compassion for the poor. I mean, there's a variety of experiences that you have over your life, and if you have a reasonably well-tuned moral compass, you will grapple as much with your character development as you will your career development. So, you know, in my life, faith in God has been the primary thing that's given me a moral compass, but that has had to grow and be tuned. And I think it's the same thing. It's a lifelong learning about your personal character development, and it's a lifelong learning about your career and skill development. And I believe that you're a generation in the middle of a shift. The stakes are high. And you've seen examples of people, when the stakes were high, make bad decisions. I mean, if any of you have read the book about the fall of Enron, I love the statement in there. They said, "We don't know when Enron crossed the line, but we know who led them across the line." And what's the real learning there? The learning is that if you don't do a balanced character development with a career development, you're going to find yourself so focused on a set of goals, you'll be like this guy in La Jolla who says, well, if the stakes are high, I can understand why people cheat. So my view is that even though this is early morning and a very serious topic, you spend most of your waking hours at work. It's your largest asset. Your lifetime earning capacity is by far your largest asset. And you're the, if I could use this, you're the operating system of this asset. I mean, you manage these resources. And I would argue that most people in this very shifting environment aren't using all the research. They're not squeezing all the learning out of these resources that they could. And these are my observations over a lot of mistakes I've made and watching a lot of different career development over the last few years. Let me digress back for a minute. Many of you have read about Bill Gates, what he does in terms of his lifetime learning, that he takes a couple weeks a year, takes a set of books, and just goes off by himself. That's a very powerful way. I think that what happens probably with Gates is he's around a lot of people who say, you know, have you read book XYZ, or so that he gets stimulated by that. And I think that I'm arguing, or my argument would be that through your mentor and through your performance appraisals, you can get some of that focus. So I'm going to take a few questions because we're going to run out of time, but I want to sum up. So my point is, or the argument that I'm making, is that lifetime learning is a very important thing. You've got to bring it into, I think for a successful career, you've got to bring that into your life. Lifetime learning, the two under-resourced areas, I think, are performance appraisals and mentoring. And I think balanced with that has to be the same kind of judicious focus on your character evolution, your character evolvement, because otherwise you'll find yourself a very targeted, high successful person backdating stock options or cooking the books at Enron or some future NREP. So with that, I'm going to open it up for your questions, and Roger's reminded me to repeat the question, so it may take me a minute to get the question clear, and then I'll repeat it. So any questions about what I've said? It was so lucid, you're shocked. Okay.
Well, I think one of the toughest thing about performance reviews is managers who don't think they're important. So do you have any advice on how to convince one supervisor to actually give you a useful review instead of sitting down, mine sits down for about 30 seconds and says, here's your review, have a nice year.
Okay, so the question is, what about a manager who doesn't seem to give the same respect to a performance review, who just in 35 minutes says, here's your performance review? Is that right? 35 seconds. Oh. Okay, number one, when you're interviewing for a job, I would bring up the performance appraisal and say, number one, I've never been put off by an employee saying, you know, I want to develop, I have great goals for myself, and I believe coming into this department and working under your tutelage is going to be part of that, and I believe very strongly in performance appraisals, and here's what you can expect from me, what's your view of performance appraisals, and if the supervisor says, no, I just do them in 35 seconds, you say, you know, I don't think this is a department for me. I don't think this is an environment where I'm going to be nurtured and grow. Now, the other side is, if you end up in a department or a manager ends up over you, I think your first one-on-one, you say, I consider this to be this is a year of my life. I'm expecting that you will give this due consideration and that you will be an advisor and a counsel for me going forward. And I think you put it on them. When I used to teach performance appraisals at Intel, teach the class, we started by having people around the room say, well, what were some of the negative performance appraisals that you've had? Or what are your gripes against performance appraisals? That's the key one. And it has to be, you have to say to this person, you're my manager, therefore this is what I expect. Other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you find a mentor, and what do you look for in a mentor?
Okay, that's a great question. How do you find a mentor, and what do you look for in a mentor? Well, you would be surprised. I was teaching a mentoring class about a year ago, and an older guy, maybe 70 years old, he says, well, I want to mentor somebody, but how do you find anybody? And I said, you just did, because there were a bunch of younger men in the audience, and he caught me later and he said, you know, I'm mentoring 4 or 5 men. And he's a retired pastor, and he's got lots of wisdom and lots of world experience. So number one, you let it be known that you're interested. And it's a bit of a dating process, but I think that I think you would say to somebody, like to have breakfast or lunch with you, and I'm interested in being mentored. Be pretty specific about what are you looking for narrow mentoring? Are you looking for the broad mentoring? And then I've in the past asked I've said, okay, I'm willing to sign up. Tell me your expectations. Are we going to do this on email? We're going to meet once a week? We're going to meet once a month? What are your expectations, so that we don't go a year or two and find out that this is not meeting their expectations. So that's one thing. I think what do you look for? I think you look for somebody that you believe is wise. They don't have to, there was a study done at AT&T that found that most of the senior executives were people that worked in a department led by a guy who was a great mentor. He never became the CEO of AT&T, but he mentored 3 of the people that became CEOs. So I think you may say to yourself, I want somebody that has wisdom, and I want somebody that has time for me. And that story about AT&T has always been an interesting thought to me, because early on when I thought about mentors, I always thought about, if you get the most successful person that you want to, I want to be like that. But then often these people don't have the kind of time for someone, and you don't want this to be something where you're trying to get time with a person and you can't get it. So I think wisdom and time. That make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Could you just share some of your reflections on balancing work and family and life, and how to work with that, given your experiences?
Okay. Would I share my experiences with balancing work and time? And since my wife is in the audience, there's going to be no wiggle room here. So I haven't done that well. Would you say that was in the past? I think it's been a learning process for me, and I was very driven in my early career, and had to, as time went on, I had to make some choices. I mean, you have to make choices. You have to make choices about, children, family, exercise. And so I once gave a talk to some people, and I said, if balance were right here, I find myself kind of going through. I recognize it as I pass through, but I'm not able, I'm trying to get these oscillations to dampen out over time around balance. And now I'm 66 years old. I may be I may be getting closer to it. But I know what kind of pressures are on all of your lives, from work and home. And it is very hard to find that kind of balance. And especially then, I think that's where, I think this character piece and your moral compass is a great guide to this balance, because you may say, I'm going to dampen some of my expectations in career to have more fulfilling family or spiritual life. Okay, I think that's the end of my time. So thank you very much. I enjoyed.
Thanks, Bill.